Next on Life Focus.
If he couldn't have me the way he'd want me, then he'd rather destroy me.
Domestic violence.
It is the scariest thing to feel like you and your children are not safe in your own house.
And when was the last incident of abuse?
1 of every 3 women in the United States will suffer sexual or physical abuse in her lifetime.
Anyone can become a victim.
He picked me up and dragged me back and pinned me on the bed.
And anyone can choose to become a survivor.
I am a person, and I want to be treated like one.
Seeing, stopping, and surviving abuse.
As long as we have breath in our bodies, it's never too late to leave.
On this edition of Life Focus.
Hello and welcome to Life Focus. I'm Dan Meyer. At one point, Leah Mayer locked herself in her room to escape her perpetrator standing outside her door. This enraged man was determined to find and physically attack her. That man was her husband. Leah's story is not uncommon. 1 out of 3 women watching this program today knows what it feels like to have someone that they love physically hurt them. On today's edition of Life Focus, we'll expose domestic abuse and violence in the home. Although the 2 abuse victims in today's program are women, we recognize that men can also be targeted. But today, through their stories, we'll learn the causes of behavior that terrorize millions of homes. Deborah Revitzer reports.
I didn't think he was somebody who would premeditate a murder. He was somebody who had no control over his temper. And I was always afraid that there was going to be that one time.
Abused for 20 years by her husband, Leah Mayer lives a wounded life.
Sometimes you just sit on the floor in the corner and you just wish you could just pull yourself close enough in that you could just disappear or will your heart to stop.
Her tolerance for abuse began as a young child.
My mother used to use a lot of ritualistic type of sexual abuse and physical torture.
The trauma she experienced left her in a vulnerable state.
I didn't know how to look for people who were going to take care of me or be nice to me. Instead, I gravitated towards people who would hurt me.
So when she met Tom, she thought someone finally loved her.
When somebody, is with you and then calls you the next day, you think, wow, and it was the first time it ever happened in my life. I thought he was a god, and I thought he was going to rescue me.
My strength was my worst enemy.
As a former Marine and kickboxing instructor, Martha Tyler considered herself a strong woman.
I had been on my own since 18, 100% self-supporting.
But her independence seemed plagued with unhealthy relationships. That's until she met Larry, a young man from her church.
By the time I met him, I had never had a good boyfriend. So when I met him, I thought I was turning the corner.
She even believed she wasn't good enough to marry a Baptist pastor.
There were times when I would look and think it was too good to be true because I didn't think I was worthy.
Their marriage seemed like a match made in heaven.
I had the marriage that everybody envied. My friends envied. The church envied. Women used to write me letters and tell me how blessed I was.
But the marriage seen through the stained glass windows of the church and the marriage taking place behind the closed doors of their home were drastically different.
He demanded submission, and I didn't know that he was demanding it because I was just so grateful to be married to him. Dear Martha, I am your husband and pastor in Christ. I just went along with everything. So we'd have problems anytime I disagreed. And then I would be persuaded to not disagree. I know to a large degree You will always be you, but at least you know that I will have difficulty relating to you without humility.
Victims of abuse often don't recognize the signs right away.
The victim begins accepting the behavior of the abuser without even realizing that he or she is actually a victim.
Abusers gain control by first demoralizing their spouse, which breaks down their confidence.
Small things like not being demanding but critical of clothes I would wear and the way I would wear my hair or makeup.
The victim of domestic violence actually starts believing the put-downs that the abuser uses, that he or she is ugly, that he or she is stupid.
Edward Vega is the executive director of the Crisis Center for South Suburbia in Illinois. He says a lack of confidence allows victims to believe the lie that they can't function without their spouse.
The only way to make himself feel better about himself or herself is to exert power and control over someone else so that that person then feels inferior, thereby making me superior.
The feeling of superiority comes when a backhanded compliment.
It starts out slow with like, you would look so much better if you wore your hair long. And you're like, oh, that's a nice compliment, somebody cares about my appearance.
Becomes an overbearing demand.
And then it changes into, I don't want you to cut your hair. And you're like, okay, you're married, you figure they can have a say in your appearance.
To finally manipulation and mayhem.
Then it goes to, if you cut your hair, I'm going to kill the dog. And then you're lost because you forget what it was like to have a choice.
Over time, mind games can turn into physical assault.
The first time that somebody that you love puts their hands on you or hits you or pushes you, you feel betrayed. You feel alone. Who do you cry to and say, I'm hurt and I'm scared if it's you I'm scared of?
Orland 911, police, fire, or medical.
It's a typical night for the police department in Orland Park, Illinois, an upper-middle-class Chicago suburb.
He's trying to hurt you?
One of every 10 of these calls is from a woman afraid of her husband and in fear for her children.
There were occasions that I did have to call the police.
Did he hit you? Are you hurt?
When it would get into a physical fight between everybody.
Men in Blue serve, protect, and now counsel families on how to resolve problems without violence.
All they want is they want the police on the scene. The damage has already occurred or the battery has already occurred.
We would all run around the entire family and try and clean up whatever had been thrown all over.
We're going to go in there and try and resolve their problem or make some suggestions.
And then when the police would get there, we'd all be sitting in the living room. I never told anybody, including the police, about the abuse. I thought it was normal.
Sometimes they become so volatile.
There would be me and him and the kids wrestling on the ground. He'd be fighting me and my son would be trying to pull him off and he'd push him. It was just so uncontrollable rage.
He says he loves you, but then why does he do that? Abuse victims Leah Mayer and Martha Tyler asked this question time and time again as they tried to see inside the minds of their angry and controlling husbands. The irony? Both women believed they were too intelligent and educated to be battered wives. They believed they just needed to help him change. They denied, minimized, and distorted reality to try and make sense of their husband's actions. What they didn't see is a predictable cycle their husbands used to knowingly and slowly take control of them.
A trip downtown to marry the man she thinks she loves. It isn't very long till he takes off the gloves.
Through poetry, Leah describes the torment many women experience.
With the loss of innocence, she forgets her natural wealth. I realize now that I'm in my 40s, and those last 20 years were some of the loneliest, blankest times in my life. She feels like a nothing believing what they say.
Through her writings, other women understand they're not alone.
I just spent those 20 years in a state of fear Anger. Can you hear it in her tears when she comes tumbling down? Resentment, pain, and loneliness.
Making their wives feel fearful, alone, and helpless is all part of abusive behavior.
It's a matter of making myself feel good. It's a matter of me fulfilling my own needs and getting what I want, not only what I want, but when I want it and how I want it.
Most abusers victimize because they themselves have a low self-worth.
He would think so little of himself, and then all of a sudden, he was king. He used to call himself a messenger from God. He knew everything, and I knew nothing, and he just had all the power.
Power and control gained several different ways.
It could be financial, it could be isolation, it could be intimidation, it could be threats, it could be sexual, and of course the worst of it is the physical abuse, which can and has ended up in death.
Those living with an abuser become paralyzed, unable to make everyday decisions.
The person is an emotional hostage.
I felt like an infant at that time who was laying on their stomach and didn't have the strength to turn over on their back to be able to breathe clear.
Is a physical hostage.
I just felt like, well, one day I'll just die.
Is a financial hostage.
I was only allowed to go to one type of grocery store, and maybe I was in a hurry and I would stop by a different grocery store and it would just be like, that's ridiculous, and I told you can't go there. That store just rips you off and you don't listen and you don't know anything and you're stupid.
And a person may share children with the abuser.
If I would say I'm gonna leave and my oldest daughter would be at a friend's house, he'd say, if you don't come home, when she gets home, she's gonna get it.
So that's just another form of being a hostage.
A cycle of captivity happens in 3 phases. The first is the tension stage, when a husband creates anxiety and hostility about common issues such as housekeeping, money, or the children.
Nothing was right. The kids were too loud, the house wasn't clean enough, and it was like I could just never do anything right. Everything was my fault. That became the way I thought, is that I'm just wrong.
The tension stage leads right into the explosive stage, a terrifying attack on the opposite sex.
You didn't have to do really anything wrong. You could be sitting at the dinner table and spill your milk, and he would just go off and start screaming and hollering, and what's wrong with you, and you're so stupid, and the poor kids would be like crying, and I'm just like, it's okay, I got the milk, tell him, calm down. Then he would turn on me.
Okay, where's he at in the house right now?
For most abusers, a simple argument triggers their uncontrollable feelings of rage.
Who else is in the house with you? How old are they?
Soon, the abuser turns fury into a physical attack.
At one point, he had me pinned against the wall downstairs. Then he had my son with his other hand saying, it's okay, it's all right. Me and Mommy are just trying to work this up. And so he's stroking my son with one hand and choking me with the other.
It started out more of a putting his hands like up near my neck to hold me, to look at him when he was yelling at me. And then it got to be more of a pushing down, and then the hitting just kind of came after that. Some of it was actually like forced rape.
The final stage of abuse is called the honeymoon stage, when after a violent episode, the remorseful husband woos his wife.
And he would realize that he had a chance of losing his family. He would apologize and, oh, I'm sorry. And there was always this bucket of chances. And he would just keep saying, I need another chance. He knew what buttons to push and how to get out of me what he needed.
What he needed was for her to feel guilty about his behavior.
I felt like it was my fault. It was my lack of being good enough.
Martha's husband preyed on her desire to be a faithful pastor's wife.
I was just determined that I was going to stay married if it killed me.
Experts say that women tend to ignore reality and suppress their pain, the very factors that allow the cycle of abuse to spin uncontrollably.
when he would say these things, I would just do it's almost like the la 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 la, you know, because it's like, no, of course he loves me. Yes, he loves me, because I couldn't bear the thought of what it really meant.
Many women that are in a domestic violent relationship have the hope that it will get better.
Leah was no different. Tom and she attended couples therapy thinking that he would change.
We agreed to try and make it work. And I felt comfortable and I felt safe, and it showed promise of a new life.
The new life Leah hoped for became an all-too recognized pattern of physical abuse and rape.
He would beat on that bedroom door and yell at me, "This is my house, you better open that door." But then he would, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. It was this back and forth stuff. So finally I realized that I couldn't be in that house anymore.
Sometimes I would just lay down and say, Lord, just take me. I didn't want to do suicide because it would hurt my children. But I would just say, if I can just lay down and you take me home, I'll be okay, because this is just too much.
Martha Tyler finally realized that no matter how much she adjusted her own behavior, her husband would not stop mistreating her. Both Leah and Martha discovered that the only way to escape daily torment was to respect their own feelings. They began by first valuing their lives and pursuing their own dreams. But those steps are much harder to take than it sounds. Deborah Revitzer concludes our report.
At home, he would tell me, if I wasn't a pastor, I never would have married a woman like you.
As an abused preacher's wife, Martha struggled with her double life.
But then at church, he would say, Sister Tyler is the perfect pastor's wife. So that was like a knife in my heart.
Finally, she decided to confide in her sister, Vilma Matthews.
Because I knew when he would come home, we were going to fight. And I would tell her some of the things that he said, and she'd say, he said, what? He said that?
I was very careful to not put him down, but yet try to get her to see it was not an acceptable way that a man who loves his wife would talk to his wife.
It's going to be okay.
I started to realize, that's not right. He shouldn't be allowed to talk to me that way.
Martha also realized that playing the role of submissive wife would not stop the abuse.
As the woman that stood by him, supported him when he was in college, as a pastor who didn't complain when he was out with members, I thought it would count for something. He treated me like I was his worst enemy, like I had done something horrible to him, and he wanted to punish me.
After 21 years of his punishment, Martha finally filed for divorce.
It's not a matter of winning, it's getting out of the game. And you win if you get out of the game. But as long as you're in there trying to fix it, trying to make it work, it's an untenable situation. It will not work.
I saw my therapist and I told him for the first time about all the abuse. He explained to me that it was a crime, what he did to me, and that I needed to protect myself.
On average, a victim of abuse will leave 7 times before making a permanent decision to never return to the abuser. Every time Leah left, Tom's abuse became worse.
The closer I got to going to be getting my own place again, he then felt like I was leaving, and he started with his anger and his controlling.
He used controlling behavior to keep Leah in his grip. But like sand in a fist, the tighter the control, the faster she slipped away. The one thing he feared most.
The only thing that abuser can think of is, how dare you leave me? And that will excite so much violence within that person, who's already proven to be a violent person, that the most violent acts may come out at that point.
To safely leave an abusive relationship, experts say you need to first educate yourself as to what your options are and whom you can trust. Then create a plan. Know how you will survive financially, where you will live, and what you will do to help your children adjust.
It is really important that you teach them when the abuser is apparently going to commit a violent act, they need to know where they can go and be safe.
With the help of her friends, Leah made a plan to safely leave her husband after 20 years of marriage.
If it wasn't for the support of my friends at that time, I don't think I could have made it.
Well, I'm glad you're here so we can talk about it.
But leaving was not enough. Leah needed emotional help.
Your past does not have to hold your future hostage.
Donna Rush-Like, her therapist, spent the last year helping Leah overcome a victim's mentality.
The important thing is you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe that you can do anything. Domestic violence is not mandatory. If we stay in it, it becomes a choice. Who are you?
I'm a survivor. After a while, I realized I didn't just want to survive. I wanted to live. I wanted to fill my life with things that I always dreamed I could.
Through counseling, Leah reclaimed her dignity.
Even on my worst days when I am ready to just throw it all in, there's still that voice that whispers to me, no, we're not giving up. And that's a gift from God.
Divorced for 6 years, Martha works on rebuilding herself.
I didn't know I was dying until I started to get well.
She now owns her own beauty salon.
That's why I recommend, because...
And still takes those long walks with her sister, now to make a plan for abused women in her community.
And he was showing signs of abuse, and then she eventually went back. So you need people in your life. Tell somebody, because it's in the secrecy, like weeds in the dark thrive. This thing thrives by her secrecy.
While her ex-husband still preaches from the pulpit, Martha says she holds a different faith, one that brings hope and healing.
You can get out of abuse by yourself, but to get strong and healthy and whole, there has to be a supernatural intervention, and only Christ. Only God can do it.
The process of empowerment and recovery takes time. Others may even blame you for sticking around. But the key to escaping an abusive life begins with learning to respect yourself. If you are an abuser, one who feels deep loss when others don't conform to your desires, look to get help from a counselor or from your local clergy. We hope this program will assist you in recognizing the patterns and signs to help yourself or someone you know. More information and sources may be found on our website. For now, we're so glad you joined us. I'm Dan Meyer, and I'll see you again next time.
If you find yourself in an abusive relationship, I would emphasize 3 things. Number 1, remember it is not your fault. An abuser abuses because he or she decides to do so, no matter what you do. Number 2, realize that there is help available to you. Be it a friend, be it a neighbor, or be it an organization like the Crisis Center for South Suburbia. Lastly, realize you are not alone.
More information about this program or other Life Focus episodes can be found online at www.lifefocus.tv. Pricing and ordering information for a DVD copy of this program are available on our website or by phone at 1-877-908-5433. The title of today's program is on the screen.